The Ghostly Boy of Okinawa. My wife and I lived for nearly 5 years on the island of Okinawa, which anyone who's ever lived there will tell you has a well-deserved reputation for being very haunted. Some of the atrocities that took place there during World War II were absolutely horrifying. Combine that with a native culture that has a strong belief in ancestor worship, and it's apparently an ideal recipe for the presence of lots and lots of restless spirits. Every year Okinawa celebrates the festival of Aben with customs and traditions that are quite different from those on mainland Japan. The purpose of Aben is to commemorate one's ancestors, and the belief is that spirits return to this world for 3 days to visit family. The timing of those 3 days is based on the lunar calendar, so the exact dates vary from year to year, but they usually fall in early August. The first day is the welcoming day. Families visit the tombs where their ancestors' remains are kept, and they escort the spirits home, where a family altar is set up with offerings of their favorite food and drinks. On the second day, family members pray to their ancestors at the family altar, often traveling from one home to another to pay respects to all their ancestors. The final day of Aben is when the family gathers to celebrate with a lavish dinner, after which they escort the ancestors back to the spirit realm with the help of teams of Isa dancers that parade through every town and village. It's an amazing festival and cultural tradition, but it's also considered to be the time in Okinawa every year when spirits of the dead are the most active. As luck would have it, our family moved into our new house on Okinawa in early August during Aben. It was me, my wife, our dog Sparky, and my wife's 2 sons who were ages 8 and 12 at the time. Let's call the younger one Brian and his older brother Jack. The house had 3 bedrooms arranged side to side on a long hallway. Jack's room was at one end of the hallway, my wife and I had the room at the other end, and Brian's room was the one in the middle, between the other 2. On our second night in the new house, we told the kids it was time for them both to go to bed. Jack went off to brush his teeth with no fuss, took Sparky into his room with him, closed the door, and went to sleep. Brian refused, though. We figured that he simply wasn't tired yet on account of the jet lag we were all experiencing after the recent flight from the USA to Japan. My wife and I told Brian he had to go to bed, even if he didn't feel tired, so he could get his body clock reset to the local time. He kept resisting, though, becoming less and less silly and more agitated. Finally, he broke down and started crying, and at that point we knew something else was seriously wrong, because this was not normal behavior for him. We hugged Brian and got him to calm down, and we tried to get him to share whatever was bothering him. It took a little while for him to open up, but then he told us an amazing story. Brian said that during the previous night, our first night in the house, he couldn't sleep on account of the jet lag. In the middle of the night he heard a noise, and he looked up to see the door to his room slowly opening. A little boy roughly his age walked into the room, illuminated by the light filtering through the window blinds from the street lamp outside. The boy walked over to the corner, and he started looking at Brian's toys that were on top of his suitcase. After a moment, the little boy looked up at Brian, and then he simply disappeared. Brian told us through his tears that he was afraid to sleep in his room because the ghost boy might come back. My wife and I both thought it was possible that Brian had dreamed all of this. He wasn't the sort of kid who just made up stories of this sort. Whatever the case, he was legitimately terrified to sleep in his room. So, we told Brian he could come sleep with us in our room for the night, and he did. The door to our room was shut all night long, and we all slept relatively soundly. The next morning, I was up early to get ready for work. Jack was awake too, and he joined me in the kitchen while I was making breakfast. My wife and Brian were both still sleeping. Because Jack had gone to bed before Brian got upset the night before, he had no knowledge about Brian's story or the fact that he slept with us. Out of the blue, Jack said to me, "I'm really worried about Brian." I asked him why, and he said, "I think maybe he's upset about moving here." I woke up in the middle of the night and went to the bathroom, and I could hear Brian in his room just sobbing. He sounded so sad. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. Brian spent the entire night with us in our room, sound asleep. So, who did Jack hear crying in Brian's bedroom? My new workplace is haunted. I recently left my old workplace for a new full-time position elsewhere. My old workplace had terrifying entities that would mess with us all the time. This new place is in an old plaza that sits right next to a graveyard. If I had have known that, I wouldn't have accepted this position. Last night I was working the closing shift with my manager and another coworker. I had ran to the back of the store to use the washroom and had left the two of them at the front of the store stocking product. While I was in the bathroom, I saw the doorknob start to violently shake up and down as if someone on the outside was smacking it. I yelled for my manager to knock it off, assuming it was him because of his penchant for practical jokes. The door handle stopped immediately, so I continued thinking it was him while I finished up. I went out to the front of the store and noticed that both my manager and coworker were engaged in a conversation with a customer. I said, "Hey, you guys need to stop screwing around when there's customers here." Both of them asked what I meant, and I told them what had happened. They both went pale and my heart sank. They furiously denied being in the back at all within the last 5 minutes. My manager went and grabbed the security footage so we could watch it back. In the footage, I can see myself enter the bathroom, see the doorknob shake violently for a few seconds, and then see myself leaving the bathroom. No one else was in the footage, and we all felt very unsafe in the space. My manager agreed we could close early to avoid being there later than we had to be. Everything just went downhill from there. I was cashing out a customer when all of a sudden all of the lights turned off in the store. They were off for about a minute while I searched for the light switches. All of the switches were in the off position. I had to turn all the switches back on. Most of the switches were 6 feet from each other on different walls, so it definitely wasn't an electrical problem. The customer I was helping joked that we were haunted and left happy with her items. We all started our closing duties and locked the door. As my manager and I were in the storage room, we had a large cardboard box filled with heavy product right beside us. While we watched in horror, the box skidded across the entire 5-foot-long table and fell off beside my manager. We both screamed and left the building immediately. We ended up just locking up the store without doing the closing duties, as my manager believed we were no longer safe in the store at that point. We have now changed our hours to 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. so that we don't have to be in the store after 10 p.m. Hopefully this will help, because I have had so many paranormal experiences I can't count them. I think I am bringing bad luck and this entity with me wherever I go, because my coworkers had never experienced anything like this before I started working there. Even our CEO won't come into the store anymore because of her experiences there. Dark figure watches me sleep. This is a story that I have only told a handful of times. This happened around 2009. I used to live with my dad, my 2 brothers, and my grandma in her house. I don't mean to sound cliche, but this house was infamous in our family for paranormal activity in the past. I used to share a room with my dad, mainly because I was terrified of sleeping in a room by myself. Even as a teenager. The night of the occurrence, my dad's girlfriend came over to stay. The room we stayed in was in the basement. It was refurbished and nice, but was still straight-up horror movie material. The three of us fell asleep around 1 a.m. after watching a movie. I was on the couch parallel to the bed where my dad and Pam, his girlfriend, were sleeping. No more than 5 feet away. I was in a great deep sleep. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, my eyes snapped open. And I was wide awake. I wasn't groggy or anything like that. It was like I hadn't even been asleep 2 seconds ago. It was so strange. I was just laying there, on my back, looking around the room. My eyes were adjusting to the dark, but I could only see silhouettes of things in the room. TV, dresser, etc. It was pitch black in the basement at night. I wasn't scared, just confused on how and why I just snapped awake like that. About 5 minutes pass, and just as I'm about to fall back into sleep, I hear my dad's voice to my left. "Tyler, what are you doing?" I was caught off guard because I didn't expect him to be awake either. I turned my head to see his silhouette, still laying in bed. I was confused as to why he asked me what I was doing when I was just laying down. I said, "What do you mean?" "I'm laying here." He didn't answer me. I was thinking he was just talking in his sleep like he usually did. I fell back asleep almost immediately. The next morning I wake up and walk into the living room. My dad was sitting at the table smoking a cigarette. I'll never forget, he had all the curtains pulled open, the radio on, and it was a beautiful sunny day outside. I walked over and sat down with him. We started talking about random shit. Then I remembered what happened the night before. I asked him, "Why do you ask me what I was doing last night?" I had a smile on my face, thinking he was gonna say he didn't remember because he was sleep talking. But he had this real serious look come across his face. He said, "I don't even think I should tell you." I instantly felt fear wash over me. I didn't want him to tell me, but I had to know. The curiosity was killing me. Just typing this out is giving me fucking goosebumps all over again. This is what he told me word for word. "Last night when you were asleep, I woke up out of the blue. I was laying there for a while before I happened to look over at you. And I seen you squatting on the arm of the couch, kind of like a gargoyle statue. That's when I asked what you were doing. But when you answered me, your voice came from the opposite end of the couch. That's when my eyes focused in and I seen you laying there. Tyler, something was watching you. I didn't want to scare you, so I didn't say anything. I just laid there and watched it. It never moved or turned its head. I couldn't make out any features or anything like that. It eventually just faded into the black of the room. That story has haunted me ever since. The scariest part of it all is that it wanted us to see it. It woke me and my dad up at the same time, unbeknownst to each other. But I never saw it. And I am so glad I did not. If I had just looked down towards my feet, there is no telling what I would have seen or what would have happened.